The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and loneliness. The overhead lights hummed softly, their pale glow washing over rows of empty chairs. She sat there, a frail woman wrapped in a pale blue hospital blanket, hands trembling around a folder of discharge papers. Her name was Margaret Ellis, 72 years old, with a heart that had worked too hard for too long. Her voice narrates softly, trembling yet composed. They said they'd come. My son, my daughter, they promised. I told the nurse, they'll be here any minute, and I believed it. For a while, the automatic doors hiss open every few minutes. Another patient leaves, a family hugs, someone laughs. Margaret's eyes follow each moment, searching, hoping. Hours pass. The cup of water beside her turns lukewarm. Her phone screen stays dark. A nurse walks by, hesitating before asking gently, "Ma'am, is someone on their way to get you?" Margaret smiles, thin and tired. Double quotes, "Yes, my children. They're just running late." The nurse nods, the kind of nod people give when they already know the truth. Evening settles in. The waiting room empties. Margaret stares at the doors one last time, then looks down at her hands. The papers blur behind tears she refuses to let fall. Voiceover, it's strange, you know, how silence can be louder than words. I used to think love meant waiting, but that night, sitting in that empty corridor, I realized waiting was all I ever did. A janitor pauses beside her, mop in hand. "Ma'am, do you need a cab?" She looks up, eyes steady now. No anger, no panic, just decision. "No, thank you," she says quietly. "I'll manage." The camera lingers on her as she wheels herself toward the exit. The automatic doors opening to the cool Texas night. The air is still, streetlights flicker. Her voice breaks through the quiet once more. "They didn't come, but that night, I made a choice that would change everything." Fade to black. The next morning, sunlight spills gently over a quiet town in central Texas, a small place where everyone knows the color of each other's porch paint and the sound of each other's dogs. Before the hospital, before the silence, this was Margaret Ellis's world. She once owned a little diner at the corner of Oak Street, Maggie's Place, a creaky sign that swayed whenever the wind got playful. The smell of cinnamon rolls greeting every customer before she even said, "Hello." Voiceover warm and nostalgic. That diner was my whole life. I opened it with nothing but my husband's old coffee machine and a recipe book full of hope. She met her husband, Daniel, at church when she was 19. He had the kindest laugh, the kind that made people look up and smile, without knowing why. They had 2 children, Ethan and Clara. Their small house always smelled like vanilla candles and fried eggs. The walls were filled with pictures, birthdays, Christmases, messy faces covered in cake frosting. Then life, as it does, changed too soon. Tanya passed away after a sudden heart attack when the kids were still in high school. The world blurred that day. The sound of his boots at the door replaced by the echo of absence. Voiceover, softer now. I told myself I'd keep the house, keep the diner, keep everything running. For them, I never let myself cry in front of the children. I didn't want them to see their mother break. She worked 16-hour days. Mornings began at 4:30, coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, and ended long after midnight. Every dollar she saved went toward her children's college fund. The locals adored her. They called her Miss Maggie, the woman who never complained and never took a day off. Even when arthritis crept into her hands, she smiled through the pain. When her son Ethan graduated as an engineer, she clapped louder than anyone in the crowd. When her daughter Clara got her nursing license, she cried in the back row of the ceremony. Silent tears of pride. Voiceover, gentle smile in tone. I used to sit on the porch at night and tell myself, "You did it, Maggie. You kept your promise. You gave them a life better than yours." As the years rolled on, the diner slowed down. Chain restaurants opened nearby. The regulars grew older, fewer. Eventually, she sold it, the only thing she ever truly owned, and retired to a quiet life. The money went into a savings account for family emergencies. She kept the old coffee machine though, said it still made the best brew in Texas. Neighbors would often stop by, bringing pies or news about town. She always welcomed them with that same soft smile, the one that made people feel at home. But beneath that smile, a new kind of silence had started to grow. Her children lived far now, different cities, different lives. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. Voiceover, almost whispering. I told myself, it's normal. Children grow up, they get busy. I wanted them to live, to see the world I never could. But some nights, The quiet in that house felt like a storm. The camera pans across her living room. A faded family portrait, dust on the frames, the empty rocking chair still creaking softly from a breeze. In her bedroom drawer lies a folded letter from Ethan, 2 years old, ending with "Love you, Mom, talk soon." She kept it close to her heart, always. That was the woman who sat alone in that hospital corridor. Years later, a woman who had given everything: time, money, love, without ever expecting anything in return. Voiceover. A tone of deep reflection. People tell you, love comes back to you. Maybe that's true. Maybe it just takes longer. But for me, it never found its way home. The sound of a ticking clock fills the room. Her eyes close for a moment, and the screen slowly fades to white. The color of memory. Time has a strange way of slipping by unnoticed. One season fades into another, and before you realize it, months have passed, and you're waiting by a phone that no longer rings. For Margaret, that was how the years began to blend together. Her children had built their own lives. Ethan was married now, working for an oil company in Houston. Clara had moved to Dallas, balancing night shifts at the hospital with her new husband and baby. At first, they called often. Sunday evenings were sacred, a time for long chats and laughter spilling through the receiver. Voiceover, gentle, nostalgic. We'd talk for hours. I'd tell Ethan about the weather, about the neighbor's new fence, about the pie recipe that went wrong. He'd laugh and say, "Mom, you worry too much." And I did. I worried about everything except myself. But slowly, those calls grew shorter. Then they became messages, then silence. Holidays came and went with promises of next year. Mom, birthdays turned into quick texts. "Love you, Mom. Busy week. Talk soon." Her neighbors noticed. They'd wave from their porches and sometimes ask, "The kids coming for Thanksgiving this year?" She'd smile, that same polite smile, and reply, "They're busy." "That's good, isn't it? Means they're doing well." The camera drifts over her kitchen table. 2 plates, one untouched, a pie cooling on the counter, a single candle flickering beside a framed family photo. Voiceover, slower, pained. I told myself it was enough, that hearing their voices once a month meant they still cared. But the truth was harder. They were moving on, and I was becoming a name on their to-do list. Then came that winter. Texas doesn't see snow often, but that year, frost covered everything. The porch steps turned slick, invisible in the early morning light. Margaret was carrying out the trash. When her foot slipped off, a sharp pain shot through her leg as she hit the ground. The world spun. The next thing she remembered was the blinding white of hospital lights and the rhythmic beep of a monitor beside her. Voiceover, quiet, shaky. "They told me I'd broken my hip." The nurse asked, "Do you have family we can call?" I gave them both my children's numbers, and then I waited. Clara sent flowers, a beautiful bouquet with a printed note. "Get well soon, Mom. Sorry I can't make it. Crazy schedule. Love you." Ethan transferred some money for hospital bills and texted, "Hang in there. Proud of you, Mom." Neither came. Days turned into weeks. Nurses became her only company. One of them, a young woman named April, often stayed a few minutes longer after her shift, just to talk. She told Margaret about her dreams, her struggles, her mother in another state. Voiceover, faint smile. April reminded me of Clara. The same tired eyes, the same soft laugh. I think that's why I never told her how much it hurt to realize the people you love most might love you less than they used to. When Margaret finally went home, everything felt different. The walls seemed quieter, the air heavier. She tried calling Ethan once. He didn't answer. She tried again, then stopped trying. She began to talk less, move slower, eat alone. Voiceover, whisper. Loneliness doesn't scream. It whispers. It sneaks in through the empty chairs and the unanswered calls. Until one day, you realize it's the only voice left in the room. The final image lingers on her living room at dusk, the TV playing softly, her empty chair rocking in rhythm with the wind. The phone sits on the table beside her, screen dark, silent. She leans back, closes her eyes, and the sound fades out, replaced by the same faint hospital monitor beep that will soon return again, fade to black. The night it happened was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. Margaret woke up to a dull pain spreading across her chest. At first, she thought it was indigestion, maybe just her old heart protesting another lonely dinner. But then the pressure grew heavier, crawling up toward her throat. Voiceover, faint, trembling. I tried to sit up, but the room spun. I reached for the phone. My hands were shaking too much to type, so I pressed Clara's number, the first on my list. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. She left a message, short, breathless. Honey, it's Mom. I don't feel right. I think I need help. She tried Ethan next. Straight to voicemail again. Her vision blurred. The old clock on the wall struck 1 a.m. with the last of her strength. She dialed 911. When she woke again, bright hospital lights flooded her eyes. Machines beeped in rhythm with her heartbeat. A nurse's calm voice drifted in. You're okay, Mrs. Ellis. You're safe now. Mild heart strain. We'll keep you for observation a few days. Margaret blinked, disoriented. Her first thought wasn't about herself. It was, did the kids call back? They hadn't. The next day, doctors visited with clipboards and tired smiles. She nodded through everything they said, her mind elsewhere, checking her phone every hour, waiting for a message. Any message. Voiceover weary when you're lying in a hospital bed. Time stretches differently. Every minute feels like an hour. Every silence feels like rejection. After 3 days, the doctor announced she was stable enough to go home. She just needs someone to pick her up, the nurse said kindly. Margaret smiled in relief. My son or daughter will come. I'll call them. She called Ethan first. No answer. She texted Clara. They're discharging me today. Can you come? The message showed read, but no reply. She waited. Hours passed. The sound of rolling gurneys, the echo of heels against the tile, all blurred together. Each time the automatic doors opened, she lifted her head, hopeful. A nurse walked by, smiling softly. Your family's on their way, ma'am. Margaret's lips curved into a small, practiced smile. Yes, just a bit delayed. You know how traffic is. But inside, something was breaking quietly, without tears. Voiceover, hollow. I used to think heartbreak was loud, that it came with shouting or slammed doors, but it isn't. Sometimes it's just waiting until hope starts to feel foolish. The clock on the wall ticked. 1 p.m. turned to 3 o'clock, then 6:00. By evening, the nurse came again. Mrs. Ellis, visiting hours are over. Would you like us to call someone? A taxi, maybe? Her fingers tightened on the edge of her blanket. She wanted to say yes, but pride, old and stubborn, held her tongue. No, she said softly. They'll come. They always do. But they did in single quotes. By 9 p.m., the hallway was nearly empty. A janitor mopped quietly, glancing at her with pity. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, the kind that makes the sky tremble. Margaret looked down at her hands, veins visible, skin thin and pale. She felt so small, like time itself was erasing her. Voiceover steady. Low, it hit me then. Maybe they weren't coming. Maybe I wasn't someone to come for anymore. The janitor stopped nearby. Ma'am, the buses stopped running. I can call you a cab if you'd like. She looked up, her eyes clear for the first time that day. Thank you, son. But no, I'll manage. He hesitated, then nodded respectfully. She gathered her papers, slipped her purse over her shoulder, and began to move toward the door. Her footsteps echoed slow, steady, defiant. As she reached the exit, her reflection appeared in the glass doors, a tired woman, alone, but somehow taller than before. Voiceover, quiet resolve. I walked out of that hospital with nothing but a folder in my hand and a heart full of something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. They'd left me behind, and I wasn't going to wait for them again. Outside, the rain had begun, soft, silver streaks against the pavement. She stepped into it without hesitation, letting the water mix with the tears she wouldn't let fall inside. The screen fades to black. The sound of rain continues over her final line. That night, I made a decision, and for once in my life, it was about me. The rain had stopped by the time Margaret reached home. The porch light flickered weakly, like it had grown tired of waiting to dot inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and old coffee, untouched, unmoved, unloved. She hung her damp coat by the door and stood in silence for a long while. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock above the mantel, the same one Daniel had fixed 100 times back when he was alive. Voiceover soft, introspective. Coming home used to feel like comfort. That night, it felt like standing inside a memory I didn't belong to anymore. She walked through the rooms, slowly, the couch where Clara used to fall asleep during movie nights, the kitchen table where Ethan once drew blueprints for his first school project. All frozen in time, but empty now, like the echoes of a life that had quietly moved on without her. Margaret sat down at the table, her discharge papers still clutched in her hand. She placed them beside a framed family photo, her children smiling, arms around each other, a younger version of her standing behind them. Voiceover. I stared at that picture for hours, wondering when love had turned into obligation, and when I'd stopped noticing, her gaze shifted toward the small wooden cabinet by the corner of the room, locked, as it had been for years. She reached for the key hidden under a ceramic teapot and turned the lock. The drawer creaked open. Inside were her most guarded treasures, property papers for her home. The diner's final sale deed, savings, account details. Insurance documents, everything she had ever worked for, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every forgotten birthday of her own, lay there, neatly stacked in a folder. Voiceover. Steady, resolute. For 70 years, everything I did was for someone else. My husband, my children, my home. But sitting there, alone, I realized I had nothing that truly belonged to me anymore. She looked at the phone on the counter. No missed calls, no messages. That was when a thought, quiet but sharp, began to form. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but from something deeper. Clarity. Margaret took a deep breath, reached for the phone, and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Her lawyer answered, surprised. Mrs. Ellis, it's been a long time. How can I help you? Her voice didn't waver. I'd like to make some changes to my will. There was a brief silence on the line. Of course, he replied carefully. Are you sure about this? Margaret's eyes drifted toward the window, where the first light of dawn was beginning to rise. I've never been more sure. She spent the next morning sorting through her belongings, neatly labeling boxes for donation, writing small notes to accompany them, to whoever needs it. She paused only once, holding a photograph of Daniel. Her thumb traced the edges as she whispered, You always said I had too much heart, Dan. Maybe it's time I use what's left of it wisely. Voiceover.com. Resolved. People think strength is about holding on, but sometimes, strength is learning when to let go. As the scene fades, the camera pans across her living room. Piles of packed boxes, documents sealed in envelopes, sunlight pouring through half-drawn curtains. The silence no longer feels hollow. It feels certain. She closes the cabinet door, locks it again, and exhales, the sound steady, almost peaceful. The day of the signing began quietly. The sky hung low and gray over the small Texas town, the kind of morning where even the air seemed hesitant to move. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her, her documents neatly stacked inside a worn leather folder. Voiceover.com. Reflective. It's strange how peace feels after a storm. Not loud, not triumphant, just still. The phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Clara. For the first time in weeks, her daughter was calling. Margaret answered after the second ring. Mom. Oh, thank God, you're home. Clara's voice rushed through. I'd just heard from the hospital. Why didn't you tell us you were discharged? There was a pause. Margaret's fingers traced the rim of her cup. I figured you were busy, she said softly. Ethan's voice joined in the background. We're coming to see you today. Okay, we'll be there this afternoon. Her lips curved into a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's nice, she replied, but I'll be out for a bit. Scene. The lawyer's office. The office was small and tidy. Shelves of old law books, the faint scent of cedar polish. Mr. Langley, her longtime lawyer, looked up from his papers as she entered. Morning, Margaret, he greeted warmly. Are you sure you want to do this today? She set her folder on his desk. I've waited long enough, don't you think? Voiceover. People think decisions come like thunder, sudden, loud, final, but the truth is, they come quietly, after too many nights of silence. As he reviewed the documents, she heard the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. The door opened, and there they were. Clara, breathless, still clutching her car keys. Ethan right behind her, his jaw tight with concern. Mom, what is this? Clara demanded, scanning the papers on the desk. Mr. Langley said you called about changing your will. Margaret didn't look up. She simply adjusted her glasses and continued signing. Yes, dear, that's right. Ethan stepped forward. To who, Mom? Mr. Langley cleared his throat awkwardly. Your mother has decided to leave her estate to the local community trust, the hospital foundation. Specifically, the silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air between them. What? Clara's voice cracked. You're giving everything away. The house, the savings, all of it. Margaret finally looked up. Steady. Not everything, she said quietly. Just what I no longer need. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Two strangers. Margaret shook her head. Not strangers. People who were there when you weren't. Ethan tried to laugh it off, voice trembling. Mom, this isn't funny. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. We'll figure this out later. She signed another page, her pen moving with a slow grace. I've done all my thinking, she said. Voiceover over their argument for years. I waited for them to come home, for birthdays, holidays, a simple Sunday dinner, but life kept happening to them, not to me. Clara reached for her hand. Mom, please, we're your family. Margaret looked at her daughter, truly looked. She saw the woman she had raised, successful, polished, exhausted, always rushing somewhere, and beneath that, the little girl who once clung to her apron, begging for one more bedtime story. Her expression softened, but her resolve didn't waver. Family shows up when it matters most. Clara, you didn't. Mr. Langley cleared his throat. Mrs. Ellis, we just need your signature here, on the final line. She took the pen again. Her hands, once trembling at the hospital, were now perfectly still. The sound of the nib scratching paper filled the room. She exhaled slowly. Done. Clara sank into a chair. Speechless, Ethan turned away, anger flashing in his eyes. You're really doing this, he muttered. Margaret nodded. Double quotes, yes, I am. Voiceover, steady, unbroken. They took my silence for weakness, but silence, it's where strength grows. Mr. Langley gathered the papers into a folder. Everything's finalized. Mrs. Ellis, she stood, thanked him politely, and turned to her children one last time. There were tears, confusion, frustration, but she felt none of it reach her. She touched Clara's shoulder gently. Take care of each other, she said softly. That's all I ever wanted. Then she walked out. Scene, the quiet exit outside. The sky had cleared. The world looked washed, new. Somehow, Margaret stepped into the sunlight, her coat fluttering in the breeze. Voiceover, closing this part. They thought they left me behind, but that day, I finally left them. The camera lingers as she walks away, a small figure against the expanse of a bright horizon. Her steps are slow, but certain, fade to white. The house was quieter than ever. After that day, the phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock, steady and indifferent. Margaret moved through the rooms slowly, her cane tapping against the hardwood floor. Each step echoed memories, laughter at the dinner table, the smell of Sunday pancakes, the slam of the front door when her children left for college. Voiceover, soft and nostalgic. It's strange how noise lingers, even after the people are gone. You still hear them in the walls, in the way the air moves when the wind blows just right. For weeks, she heard nothing from Clara or Ethan. At first, she expected anger, then guilt, then maybe silence forever. What she didn't expect was peace, the anxiety that had once kept her awake, the endless waiting, the hope that maybe tomorrow someone would remember her. It began to fade. She started going for morning walks again. She began baking, leaving small batches of cookies at the hospital reception. She smiled more, not because someone gave her a reason, but because she finally stopped needing one. Scene, the letter one afternoon. The mail arrived. Tucked between bills and local newsletters was a single white envelope. Her name, written in her daughter's careful handwriting. She hesitated before opening it. Inside a letter, a few pages long, tear-stained in places. Mom, I don't know where to start. I was angry. I thought you were trying to punish us, but I see now, you were just tired of being forgotten. You gave us everything, and we gave you excuses. I'm sorry. I wish I'd been there that night. I wish I'd been there. All the nights you waited. Margaret folded the letter gently, pressing it to her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Voiceover. Sometimes apologies come too late, but sometimes they arrive right on time, not to change the past, but to ease the heart. She placed the letter in her drawer beside an envelope labeled Hospital Fund. Scene, the reading room. A few months later, a small ceremony was held at the local hospital. A new reading room, warm yellow walls, shelves filled with donated books, soft chairs near the window. A small plaque near the entrance read, "In loving memory of those who waited alone, donated by Margaret Ellis." Margaret came every Thursday. She'd bring cookies, talk with the nurses, sit with patients who didn't have anyone to visit them. One young nurse smiled at her. "You must be proud, Mrs. Ellis. You've done something beautiful." Margaret looked around, sunlight spilling across the floor, a patient laughing softly in the corner, the faint hum of life returning to a place once filled with waiting. Proud, she said gently. No, just grateful. Voiceover warm, fulfilled. They left me once in a cold, empty corridor. But life, it led me back here, to fill those holes with something better. The camera lingers as she places a tray of cookies on the table, her hands steady, her eyes soft. She steps to the window, watching families arrive, some with flowers, some with tears, some just holding hands. For a long moment, she stands there in silence, the golden light wrapping her like an old friend. Would you like me to continue with the final emotional ending and reflective voiceover monologue that closes the story with hope and peace? Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, touching the pages of open books and the soft white walls of the reading room. Margaret sat by the window, her favorite spot, a cup of tea in hand, the faint smile of someone who had finally made peace with the years behind her. Outside, a light breeze carried the laughter of children visiting their grandparents in nearby rooms. Life moved on, steady, gentle, and full. Voiceover.com, filled with quiet strength for a long time. I waited for someone to come back, for a knock on the door, a phone that would ring, a sorry that might fix the ache of being forgotten. She turned a page in her book, slow, deliberate. Her eyes drifted to the plaque across the room, in loving memory of those who waited alone. Voiceover continues, but I've learned, love doesn't always arrive in the arms you expect. Sometimes it comes through the kindness of strangers, through the sound of laughter that isn't yours, but heals you anyway. The nurse from before passed by, setting a vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill. Morning, Mrs. Ellis, she said warmly. Margaret smiled. Morning, dear, those look lovely. The camera lingers, the sunlight deepens, wrapping her in soft gold. A faint reflection of her younger self appears in the window, apron dusted with flour, laughter echoing from years ago. She doesn't look away. She just smiles at her own reflection. Voiceover. Final monologue. They thought they left me. But maybe, they just taught me how to stop waiting. Love isn't proved by words, it's proved by who shows up, and by what we choose to build from what's broken. She takes a sip of tea, looking out at the bright Texas sky. The camera slowly pulls back, the reading room fading into a warm glow, the sound of pages turning like a heartbeat. Final line, soft, redemptive. I stopped waiting, and I started living again. Fade to white. Soft piano music plays,